For those of you who don't know me on the call, my name is Emma Brown and I'm the founder of Whimble. We are a care tech platform based here in Ottawa, and our goal is to build an Uber-style platform for personal care where people in need of urgent or short to medium-term personal care assistance can connect with vetted, insured, experienced personal care attendants on demand. We also partner with event organizers and venues to ensure they offer on-site attendant services as part of their accessibility accommodations for guests, volunteers, staff, employees, anyone who needs a little bit of extra support. And again, whether that's a young person with a disability, a senior with a mobility device, and everything in between. I'm really excited about this conversation today because my primary kind of lived experience in this space has been through a sibling who has a disability, but I also happen to have a very beloved grandmother who's living with quite advanced dementia. So our conversation today is something I've personally faced and my family's actively going through right now. So I'm excited to use this for my own purposes in our conversation. So yeah, I'd like to introduce everyone to Daniel Clarke. Daniel founded Elderado after his grandmother was hospitalized with lupus, and his family was also suddenly thrown into a very complicated system with little guidance. They struggled to figure out which homes could offer appropriate care, where their loved one would be most comfortable, how much it would cost, and where to even begin. Daniel was shocked that there wasn't an easy way to search, compare, and filter elder care options, so he set out to build a platform that would make the process clearer, faster, and less overwhelming for other families going through similar situations. We love a founder who identifies a problem in a space and decides to solve it. So I first met Daniel last summer at a tech conference, and he's such a great person. Within minutes, he had his camera out and he was filming a little spotlight on Whimble and promoting us on LinkedIn. So I super appreciated his kind of general support and community building in this space. And I think we also just connect as founders who have very real lived experiences of the challenges. So Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have a lot on your plate, so I really appreciate your time and patience with my technical ineptitudes.
No, thank you for having me.
Okay, we're running a bit behind schedule, so I'm going to jump right into our first question. And we'd just like to chat through, why is this so broken? Like, why is this so confusing? And why is navigating this life transition of aging so hard for most families?
Yeah, that's a great question and really appreciate you having me on here. I think a big issue with elder care navigation is that for most of us, it's not something we think about until we need it. And then really when we need it, that's one of the most difficult times to try and navigate through it because for a lot of us, there's some sort of an event, whether it's a medical event, it could be some sort of change in circumstances, but there's something that happens that then causes a lot of us to then start looking at our elder care home options. And it's already going to be a stressful time, a busy time, a time when we've got a lot on our shoulders. And now we've got to learn about what is a long-term care home? What is retirement homes? I hear what are nursing homes? I hear these horrible stories on the news that really spook me. And I don't know what my options are. I hear there's really long wait lists. So there's just a lot of noise in the space and very few people, very few resources that can actually walk you through it. And part of the problem is that because there is such a demand for these resources. If you're looking at long-term care homes, there's about 50,000 people on a wait list in Ontario for long-term care. So it can be hard to get that support when you first start looking to really understand and untangle the web of kind of what all your different options are, just because there's so much demand on resources that they're really, a lot of the focus is just on the people who have the highest needs. How do we get them the care that they need? And then also I find there's a lot of broken telephone in the industry where somebody's heard from somebody else about all these bad things that are happening, or the negative side of the industry really gets highlighted. And I'm not saying that there aren't things that don't need to be improved. There certainly are. But also from what I found is that overwhelmingly in the industry, it's lots of good people with great hearts that are doing the best that they can with the resources that they have. And that's especially true on the long-term care side of things, where I finally get a kind of more of a reputation. And then in the retirement living side of things, I think a lot of people just aren't aware of how incredible some of these retirement homes, especially on the independent living side of things, just how incredible they are. So we just don't know about it until we need it. And then when we need it, it's very stressful to try and untangle that web and understand what your different options are.
I just can't imagine having a sudden event like a grandparent having a stroke or a fall or some serious event like you described it. And then maybe this is dating myself, but just like opening up the phone book and starting to make calls to be like, who's got a bed or what's it going to cost?
Yeah,
Um,
that's a very real problem, and something that some people might have heard about is Bill 7, or the More Beds Better Care Act, where if you're in the hospital and that you're deemed to be in an ALC bed or an alternate level of care. So you don't technically need to be at the hospital, but there's not really anywhere else for you to go. So people have heard about, or they might have heard that after 3 days, the hospital can start charging you for that bed if you haven't put your name forward for long-term care. And then also that they can force you into a long-term care home that isn't one that you chose. That adds a complexity of time pressure that when my family was going through it with my grandma, that we didn't have to deal with 8 years ago, but now adds another layer of difficulty to the mix.
oh my gosh, there's literally a clock ticking on these decisions and this information. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking $400 a day for the
Yeah.
bed. That adds up very quickly.
And just if you can elaborate a bit, because I have, like you mentioned earlier, the news loves a good villain story. And I feel like a lot of these facilities are always the villain in most of the news articles. But I have heard rumblings about this Bill 7 situation. Could you just explain a little bit more about what happens if you haven't found a bed and you haven't tried and they've started charging you, and what the process is for them moving you? Can they move you to any facility in Ontario, or how does that process work if they're starting to force you into a home you didn't choose?
Yeah, so there's the letter of the law with Bill 7, where essentially once it's deemed that you're an alternate level of care, that after 3 days they can start charging you for the bed. Now, what I've heard is that generally that the clock doesn't actually start in reality after 3 days. We're all humans. There's a lot of compassion in kind of all aspects of the industry, but it does also reach the point where that hospital has other people in the emergency room and things where they need beds. So that's when they'll start putting a little bit, or in some cases a lot of pressure on families. So the way that it works with Bill 7 is that I might be getting the distances wrong, but I think that if you're in a urban setting, I think they can send you to a long-term care home that's up to 70 kilometers away. And then a rural setting that might be in the neighborhood of 100 kilometers away. And it's basically once a bed becomes available somewhere, that's where they'll send you. The idea being that it's just temporary. And if for long-term care, if you're not on the crisis list, you can list your top 5 options. So when those options come available, then theoretically you would be moved into one of them. I've heard conflicting reports on whether or not that is the process that family that's being followed. And I have heard that's the reason why some families have turned down those beds. But yeah, it does create a very difficult situation for families to navigate.
Oh, so stressful. It's a very parallel situation to what we see with a lot of our clients. We do have clients who are seniors, of course, and aging at home, but we also have clients who have gone through a major injury, like a spinal cord injury or a diagnosis like multiple sclerosis is really deteriorating quickly, and being stuck in a hospital waiting for an accessible apartment unit or an accessible home that's equipped for their needs. It's a common challenge on the younger end of the spectrum as well.
Yeah, there's just a capacity challenge within our healthcare system right now. And that's something that, especially anybody who's a baby boomer right now, like these problems don't get solved quickly. And it's things that we have to start taking very seriously, because to build new infrastructure takes years or even
Mhm.
decades.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like there's any fast solution that I know of, any fast solutions on the horizon. Can you just clarify for me the difference between a long-term care home and a retirement home, just to make sure we're all on the same page?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because there is a lot of confusion around that. So the easiest way to break up long-term care and retirement homes are 100% private pay. So that means that when you move into a retirement home, you're paying for room, for board, all your meals, you're also paying for all your care. Whereas in a long-term care setting, you pay for room and board, but then the government pays for all your care. So The rates in long-term care are capped. So currently, the rate for a private room in long-term care is about $2,900. They
Mhm.
adjust it annually on January 1st to go along with inflation. And then on the lower end for a basic room, they're just over $2,000. And when you hear about wait lists and having to wait years to get in, they're talking about long-term care because every long-term
Mhm.
care home in Ontario is at 100% capacity, and that's where we've got 50,000 people waiting on a wait list. Sometimes they're also referred to as nursing homes, but technically
Mhm.
in Ontario we classify it as long-term care. And then in retirement homes, because it's all private pay, you pay for the care that you need. So as your care services go up, then your costs are going to go up as well. And it really depends on where you are as to how much rates start at. I was in a retirement home where rates started at $2,100 recently, but I've also been in other retirement homes where rates start at closer to $5,000 and can scale up quite significantly from there because you're paying for all the care. So ORCA, which is the Ontario Retirement Community Association, they're pushing for a seniors tax credit to try and subsidize some of those care costs for
Mhm.
seniors in retirement homes. But yeah, as it stands right now, retirement homes are completely private pay. You apply to the individual homes. Long-term care is subsidized, and you apply through Ontario Health at Home as opposed to applying to the homes directly.
I actually did not know that. I thought retirement homes were more just like independent living, like less hands-on care. But can you get the same level of care at a retirement home as you would like with really complex medical needs as you would at long-term care?
Yeah, it really depends on the home. So
Yeah.
in the retirement home side of things, you'd start off with independent living, which in some areas, independent living homes can rival resort living, where
Mhm.
they're amazing amenities, great food, you've got beautiful suites, all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Above that, once you start needing some more assistance, especially assistance with activities of daily living,
Mhm.
then you're moving into assisted living, which is going to be more expensive. If you've got any sort of cognitive decline like dementia or
Mhm.
Alzheimer's, you'd be looking at memory care. And then because there's such a backlog for long-term care, more and more retirement homes are supporting higher levels of care. So sometimes it's called assisted living plus or enriched care or enhanced care. It does get very expensive. Like typically you're looking at starting at somewhere in the $9,000 to $10,000 a month range, but they are able to provide basically the same level of support that you can receive in a long-term care home, but it's very expensive because there's a lot of hands-on care, and because
Mhm.
none of that's subsidized by the government, there's certain families that if they're in the financial position to be able to do it, instead of continuing to wait for a long-term care home, they'll move their loved one into a enriched care or enhanced care in a retirement home.
Okay. And then if you take a private pay spot, do you lose your spot on the public waiting list or is it
No,
not?
it's completely separated.
Okay.
So yeah, it's siloed a little bit. So retirement living, it's run by the RHRA, the Retirement Home Regulatory Authority, oversees that. Whereas for long-term care, it's overseen by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. And if you're moving around in retirement living, that has no impact on your standing for long-term care. And there's a number of people, a big percentage of people who are living in retirement homes are simultaneously on wait lists for long-term
Mm.
care.
I just can't imagine carrying that monthly expense. That's wild.
Yeah, it is
Um,
expensive. One of the ways that people are able to subsidize some of their costs are either if they're able to get home care support through Ontario Health at Home, that's
mhm.
something that you can continue to get in a retirement home setting because those are
Okay.
considered private residences. And
Mhm.
then so there would be some people, perhaps somebody is using Whimble for some at-home care, and that's something you can continue to receive when you're in the retirement homes, whether it's going to be more cost effective for you or whether you just got a relationship with those caregivers. That is
Mhm.
something that continues to be something that's available to you when you're in retirement living and long-term care as well. There's just less people who utilize things the private side in
Mhm.
long-term care.
So a hybrid model is possible. So I guess when I know it's obviously if everyone could predict when they're going to have a major life event, planning would be a lot more straightforward. But when, given we can't see the future, we don't have a crystal ball, when should people start thinking about their care options or their family members' care options? Like, when is a good time to start that process of learning about the system and learning what options are out there?
Yeah, like theoretically, as early as possible. Like, really, say somebody's worked their career, they've just retired. great time to start understanding what your options are. And something that we're a big supporter of is encouraging people to go to different open houses or events that are happening, especially at retirement homes, because then you'll be able to see whether it's a lifestyle that you're interested in or not. And you'll really get to understand what retirement living is. It's a little bit more difficult to have those sort of opportunities. They don't exist as much on the long-term care side of things, but actually starting to go out and be proactive and see what your different options are. I've toured 45 retirement homes so far this year. And something that's really stood out for me is the different personalities of the homes, because it's largely made up by the residents that are there, that the staff that are in the home. There's other elements like the different care that they can
Mhm.
support, the amenities, activities, things like that that are going on, but very much starting to get a feel for what the personality of the different homes are, as because it really does vary quite
Mhm.
significantly. So if you're able to do that earlier, you can get a better understanding of where you would feel most comfortable. And a lot of people who are moving into independent living, a common response you get is, I should have done this sooner, because they see that suddenly they don't have to be concerned about yard work. They don't have to be
Mhm.
concerned about preparing all their own meals. Now, if they want to move into a retirement home where they still have a kitchen, those are
Mhm.
available. If you
Mhm.
still love gardening, there's all sorts of retirement homes that have raised garden beds that are available to residents to use. But just to have a good understanding of what your options are, the earlier you can start looking, especially when you're looking when you don't need it, you can be a lot more pragmatic in your approach and have a much clearer view of where you're going to be comfortable.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can, as you were talking, I was picturing like visiting one great aunt at a home that felt like a luxury quiet hotel with like classical music floating through the hallways. And then I've also been at others that it's, oh, this feels like actually a very fun party vibe. So very
And
different.
that part, like there's retirement homes I've toured where I've been there while happy hour is going on, and you would think that you were like at a college dorm. Like there are people having a great time, and it's a little bit louder, like a lot of fun, like maybe some dancing and things like that
Mhm.
going on. And then there's other homes a lot more subdued, lots of people reading, and it's just figuring out which home is most comfortable for you. I've been in all
Mhm.
sorts of beautiful retirement homes, but some of them I just feel more comfortable if I was going to be living in than others. And it's just
Mhm.
figuring out where you would be most comfortable.
Yep, that makes sense. I can imagine the shenanigans that go on in the party residences. As people start this planning process and they start to think ahead of doing these tours, starting to pay attention to this space, is there anything that you've seen be successful in terms of like starting to accept help at home and starting to ease that transition of moving into more of a residence or facility? Or is there anything people can do pre-move to actually prepare themselves for this transition?
Yeah, I think that circles back to the idea of actually getting to tour some homes to actually see what it's like especially
Mhm.
in independent living. A lot of the big focus on that is to have residents maintain their independence and really live their best life. It's not the end of your story. It's
Mhm.
another chapter. And a lot of homes that offer independent living, they're really looking at what opportunities exist to enrich the lives of their residents. That's where actually going on tours is something that can appease a number of people. And when you're on tours, typically they'll offer a free lunch while you're there. So you get to try some of the food. Food is a big part of our
Mhm.
everyday life. And if you can be somewhere where you enjoy meals, you got something to look forward to
Mhm.
every day, that can have a big impact. We're really big advocates for getting into homes and being able to check them out just so
Mhm.
that people know what retirement living really is. Beyond that, you can have discussions about just where the whole family is at, because there are times where there's families that are doing a lot of the family caregivers that are doing a
Mhm.
lot of heavy lifting, and it can be a big challenge to balance the different aspects of life. Those are discussions that are very specific to each family. So definitely having that sort of talk is something that's great to have. But yeah, the biggest thing that we've seen is just actually getting into different retirement homes, and something that can be a warm entry to something like that. If somebody's not comfortable for going to a tour, is
Mhm.
that there's a good chance that whoever is be looking at an elder care home for, they might have a friend that's in a retirement home starting there, and maybe it's a great first experience. Maybe it's not, but either way, that's a starting point to begin this journey.
Yep, that makes sense. Another thing I've heard or experienced through Whimble is the family might be having a discussion because they're picking up a lot of the pieces and they're doing a lot of the kind of not invisible care, but like unrecognized care that people are starting to need as they age. And so the families, okay, I think we're ready to start having this conversation, but the individual wants to maintain their independence and maintain their dignity, which I get. But one thing we have seen work well with Wimble as well is it's like a tiptoe into accepting help or accepting that life can be easier if you take advantage of these opportunities. And so we'll have families who will book us, for example, for housekeeping. And it is a PSW going in to do the housekeeping, but it's like you just get used to another person being in your house and helping you out. And then that's the like entry point for building further and further care and making sure that bathing is being done safely at home and meal prep and like monitoring food intake is still going on while they're waiting for that perfect spot to open up. Yeah, that's one thing we've also seen that might help beforehand is just getting people used to the idea of you can. I feel like especially this like baby boomer and older generation doesn't want to ask for help, but getting used to the idea that like help is a good thing and you want to have a support network around you so that you're not waiting too late, like you mentioned earlier, to take this help and then your quality of life has deteriorated a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. And especially on the home care side of things with a provider like Wimble, think about what is something that you don't like doing around the
Mhm.
house. And okay, so we can take that off your plate and then replace that time with something that you do enjoy
Yeah.
doing. And just continuing that process is a great way to tiptoe into it.
Exactly. And it relieves, hopefully can relieve a little bit of the pressure on the family members to move
Absolutely.
there. Yeah. Okay. So ideally you've planned this all out, you've started putting like plans in place, had these conversations, but like we mentioned earlier, you can't always predict what's going to happen. So say tomorrow someone has a sudden emergency come up, as we say, like shit hits the fan and you need a solution now, you're on that 3+ day, the clock is ticking. What do you do? What do you recommend doing next?
That's the reality for a lot of families is that's the situation that they find themselves in. And so we don't have to fret over, oh, we should have done this previously. We can worry about that later. Let's get down to we've got a loved one that needs support. So how do we get them support? So first thing that needs to be identified is what are their care needs? What support do they actually need? So that then kind of what we should be looking at based on what their care needs are, that can help give some perspective on are we looking at long-term care? Are we looking at retirement homes? Are we looking at both? As a lot of people very quickly find themselves funneling towards long-term care or the retirement home route. What's your budget? An unfortunate reality is that budget plays a big factor here is what your options are. And then where are you actually looking for care? So identifying what that area is. And so where most people look is either where their loved one already is so that they're staying in the community or that they'd be moving closer to a loved one, which the reality is that most often the loved one that they would move closest to is that if they've got a daughter, their eldest daughter ends up picking up a lot of the slack here. And something that I will say about if it's a medical event that is bringing this on is that whether you're in retirement home or long-term care, it's really important to have somebody who can advocate for your loved ones. Being close to somebody who can be that person to advocate on your behalf is something that I would really prioritize because
Mhm.
there's going to be times where you're going to struggle to be advocating for yourself, and it's just natural that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. On Elderado, we've got a platform that helps you to then identify which homes are going to fit that profile. So with Elderado, we built a platform where we've got every long-term care home and every retirement home in Ontario on our platform, and it works very similarly to booking a hotel on booking.com. We use that kind of same search, filter, compare process. So we've got a variety of different filters. So based on the care services you need, if you know you're looking for just retirement home or long-term care homes, what the starting price is, if you're looking for a particular language of care. So a lot of people don't know this. We've got 24 different languages that at least one home in Ontario offers care in that language.
Wow.
And we've also got 23 different cultural designations. So, what cultural designations mean is they don't guarantee that you can receive care in that language, but a lot of residents are going to be from that culture. And a lot of the meals and activities are more geared towards that culture. So, if say you take somebody who is a 90-year-old Chinese man who has had congee for breakfast his whole life, if he's moving into a retirement home where they're serving toast and eggs for breakfast, that is a massive lifestyle change. Whereas there are Chinese cultural long-term care homes where congee will be one of the options to have for breakfast. So being able to identify that is something that's really helpful. And then it's a matter of trying to actually schedule tours to get into to some of the different homes. I think it's really important to schedule to take tours. You can contact all the homes through Elderado, or you can find their contact other ways. But just picking from online, there's times where, that's going to be your only option. And with Elderado, we've pulled in as many different resources. Like you'll find video tours, inspection reports, sample menus, activity calendars, room layouts, things like that. But still there is a difference from actually getting into the home and getting a sense of where you're most comfortable. And then just depending on whether you're going the long-term care route or the retirement home route, if you're going the long-term care route, then you're going to be in touch with Ontario Health at Home. Whether if you're in a hospital setting, then there'll be somebody at the hospital that'll come in and do the assessment. Or if you're at home, then you'd be calling Ontario Health at Home and they would do an assessment to see the placement category that you get placed in for how soon you'll be able to get into long-term care homes. Or with retirement homes, you're contacting the homes directly. You apply directly to the home and kind of work it out that way. Initially, you've got to know what care do you need? What's your budget? Do you know if you are looking for long-term care or retirement home? Where are you looking? And then that's when you can really start using tools like Elderado to really focus in on which homes are going to be the best fit for my loved one.
Oh, that's amazing. There's so many factors to consider. How much does it cost for someone to use Eldorado?
Yeah, so Eldorado's free for families to use. We let you contact every home in Ontario. So traditionally, the way our platforms work is they either charge homes to be on the platform and to get leads. So then that's why a lot of platforms only have a small number of the homes listed on them, or they charge the families for access to information. Being in the shoes of family caregiver looking for care, it was really important to us that we build a platform that it lets families, it should be free for families to use. You don't think that you should have to pay to know which homes are going to be the best fit for your circumstances. And we also want to make sure that it's as easy as possible to contact every home. So we don't charge the homes to receive the lead. So that's the way that we're able to put people in contact with every single home in the province. So we're actually the only platform right now that includes all your long-term care and retirement home options in Ontario in one place.
Amazing. That's so cool. I need your help with building Whimble's platform. Just one last question is, when you are on those tours, what should people be looking for?
Yeah, so when you're going through a tour, it's generally going to follow the same sort of process. We're going to check in. They might do a little bit of a discussion ahead of time. Then they're going to show off, walk you through the building. There's obvious things like if a building is really disheveled, it's messy and things like that. There could have been an incident that just happened. That's something that's definitely going to put up anybody's radar. Something that I've found to really be something that you can pay attention for is that when that sales consultant is taking you on a tour, especially in a retirement home setting, do they acknowledge the residents as you're passing by in the hall? And even better, do they know people by name? That is something that I've noticed. There's just a different sense in particular retirement homes when you see that the staff are acknowledging all the residents, because ultimately you're looking for a home. You're not looking for an institution. So the more homey that it can feel, the better. So I always think that when there's that kind of rapport between the staff and the residents, it's something that people don't always think of, but I find it really stands out. And then I would also say really trust your gut. They're at a certain point there, you've got to take a little bit of a leap of faith here for whichever home that you choose. If your gut's pulling you towards, you think somewhere is the best fit, then kind of really trusting where you feel most comfortable, and most importantly where whoever's going to be living there feels most comfortable, because it can be very easy for us to project, oh, this is where I'd like to live. But really, where does your loved one want to be? Where does it have, the amenities, the lifestyle, the even things like the decor where they feel most comfortable. Because some homes, as you alluded to, are very beautiful and very fancy. But I think someone like myself, like when I'm not working, a lot of times I'm in like sweatpants and
Mhm.
things like that. Although those homes are beautiful, there's other homes where I would feel a little bit more myself, a little more comfortable. So just keeping that in mind too, is that you're not looking for a home for your family member. We deal with a lot of family members who are looking for their parents with Elderado. If you find yourself in that setting or in that situation, then where would your loved one, especially a lot of times it's parents, so where would your
Mhm.
parents feel most comfortable?
That makes so much sense. I love the kind of vibe check tip on do they recognize and acknowledge the residents. And I think it's also important from like our point of view to always keep in mind during those tours, if you do need supplementary care, you can bring in your own support, even if it's on a temporary basis. Like we have clients, for example, who I laughed when you said oldest daughter, because I'm also the oldest daughter. And we have clients who are probably the oldest daughters supporting their parents in retirement homes and just doing a little bit extra because what they get through the retirement home with whatever service level they're on just isn't quite enough. Even the oldest daughters get to go on vacation sometimes and take or need a bit of a break or respite. So that's where services like Whimble can be that backup as well. So you don't have to think of it like I have to, it's like the be all end all, and I just have this one solution for the rest of my life. So there's lots of
And
fun.
that was what you just mentioned there is something that I think more families should take advantage of is that if you're receiving home care right now, it'll be up to the family whether they want to continue with private home care long term or if they want to
Mhm.
transition to the care provided by the staff at the home. But
Mhm.
having a period of 2, 3, 4 weeks at least where you're continuing with that consistent care, because
Mhm.
it does a couple of things on the care side. It makes sure that they're receiving consistent care, everything around them, their home is changing,
Mhm.
and it allows, if they are going to be transitioning to receiving care from the home, it allows their current caregivers in order to coach through what it is that they like. And then also the social side of moving into a new home, it can be very intimidating. So if you've
Mhm.
got somebody who can be there with you and they can almost be a conduit to make some introductions. If
Mhm.
that's your personality, then you've got somebody there that can do that. You've got somebody that is going to be showing up that's a familiar face. I love when I hear that families are continuing with private care, at least for a period of time,
Mhm.
because I really do find it eases that transition.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like so much is changing. So try to have some element of normalcy or consistency. I'll just give a couple of minutes for questions. So I'm just checking the chat to see if any questions have come in. And I'm just going to, I have a few questions that I want to ask you as well. We did chat a little bit about this around the things to watch out for during a tour. And you did mention a few things that maybe are like orange flags. Are there any like serious red flags that you've, from your experience being in so many different facilities, are there any like serious red flags that you go, I would not send a loved one to this place that might not be so obvious?
So personally, I haven't seen anything like that. Yeah, like I said, I've been in 45 retirement homes this year, and I would guess I've been in more retirement homes this year than anybody has. Um,
Ever.
but yeah, so I haven't seen anything that I haven't seen anything that was shocking or was a
Mhm.
hard stop. No, I
Mhm.
absolutely wouldn't feel like this home is somewhere that's appropriate. And that is something that if we came across something like that in a home, that is something that we would add to their profile, that something to be aware of, because at the end of the day, our goal is to help families find a home that's going to be the best fit for them. So yeah, I haven't personally come across any of that. Doesn't mean that things like that don't happen, but yeah, like you come across hearing stories of a
Mhm.
resident who has fallen and it takes ages for anybody to come across them. And if I had a loved one in assisted living, that would be something that I would be concerned about. So for those sort of red flags, like if somebody is really trying to do their due diligence, what I would recommend you do is all the inspection reports for retirement homes are and long-term care homes are publicly available. For
Mhm.
retirement homes, they're in the RHRA database. We're about to have all their inspection reports added to Elderado.
Okay.
And for long-term care, they're on a ministry website. You can find all of them currently on a link to all of them on Elderado. What I would do is I would read through some of their more recent inspection reports. And then when I was going on a tour, I'd actually ask questions about that because you
Mhm.
will find things within inspection reports that it's not super common that things
Mhm.
are really bad that happens, but the reality is that there are times that things do happen in homes. So I would even consider printing out the inspection reports and bringing them in on a tour and asking, how is this being resolved? What went on here?
Mhm.
And then that's where you then hear from them and you'll be able to make a judgment whether, whether their answer kind of
Mhm.
satisfies what you're looking for. But I think that would be the best way to identify any red flags and then see what the any home has to say about them.
I imagine when you come in, the retirement homes are quite nervous because you know what questions to ask. And then I guess going back to the very beginning of our conversation about like how to start having that conversation with your family, are there any, or have you heard of any tips, or do you have any tips on how to start having that conversation, like with your parents or with a loved one of, I think it's time for you to start considering this? Do you know what the best way to navigate that conversation is?
Yeah, so a lot of kind of what we touched on, and especially what you touched on earlier, where using a more gradual approach, because a lot of times if you're sitting down to have a conversation in where it's more open, then it
Mhm.
probably means that there isn't something that is a urgent need in
Mhm.
most cases. A lot of
Mhm.
times it's going to be something where you see it trending
Yeah.
in that direction, and that's where it so comes down to individual families. Something
Mhm.
that can always be done is, if we use the eldest daughter example, is you can go and tour a couple of homes and start getting familiar to get a
Mhm.
sense of, okay, this is somewhere where my parents might be more comfortable, or this would be
Mhm.
somewhere like I don't think that you should take them here, so that you have a good idea going into it of if it's a negotiation to get them to even take part in touring a retirement home or going to an open house event or something like that,
Mhm. Mhm.
then trying to set yourself up for success by choosing somewhere that they're more likely to be more comfortable. If they're looking at the home care side of things, then exactly what you said earlier, as to start with tasks that people don't like doing and
Mhm.
using that as a way to
Mhm.
introduce getting a little bit more
Mhm.
around the be
Mhm.
something that's really great. There's also certain day programs or senior center. I'm in Whippy, and we've
Mhm.
got a Whippy Senior Center, but the Oshawa Senior Center is this huge network. They've got all these amazing kind of programs and activities and things like that. And that can also be a way to start opening people up to some different social interactions, because a lot of
Mhm.
times I find a lot of the pushback just becomes, I don't want to be in a new environment where I have to meet new people, and that's
Mhm.
just is
Mhm.
really uncomfortable. And the
Mhm.
more that you can overcome that sort of objection, the better position you'll be in.
Totally makes sense. And then last question, I'm just checking the chat. The last question was, are there government subsidies, or I think we touched on this earlier, but are there government subsidies or financial assistance options available for retirement or long-term care?
Yeah, so on the retirement home side of things, they're not of any sort of significance. I believe there is some very minor tax credit, but like
Mhm.
really it ends up literally being a drop in the bucket compared to what your overall costs are. Orca is working on the seniors tax credit, and there's a few other organizations involved in it. It's just I've seen Orca really
Mhm.
being the one driving the bus
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
really push for that. That's something in Quebec. They've got a seniors tax credit there that has been there for a number of years. It might be in the neighborhood of 20 years there, and it's worked very successfully there. So that's what
Mhm.
they're trying to replicate here. On the long-term care side of things, if you're in a basic room,
Mhm.
there is the opportunity to have the room subsidized if you qualify for it as a low income resident. I think this year the threshold for it is that you have an income of less than about $24,000. And so if you qualify for that room, it's a whole calculation that they use, but essentially what's going to happen is that any of the money that you have coming in will go toward your suite, and then you are left with a comfort allowance. And I think the comfort allowance is somewhere around $100 a month, and that's meant to cover things like clothing, toothpaste, kind of anything else. It
Mhm.
does only apply if you're in a basic room though. So in long-term care, you've got private, semi-private, and basic. So a basic room is either an individual that's in a basic room, or if a couple is sharing a semi-private room, that also qualifies basic. But otherwise, you aren't eligible. So that's just something to be aware of, is that if you're looking for applying for a subsidy in long-term care, you've got to make sure that you're in a basic room.
Okay. Okay, that's really helpful. And now I'm having a little spiral panic about my lack of retirement savings to pay for all of this. Like,
It's something that has opened my eyes
yeah.
up yeah, when you're in the situation, you deal with what you can deal with. But if you are someone who's younger watching this, it is something to take retirement savings very seriously, in part because we're living much longer than we used to. So those retirement savings have to be stretched over a much longer period.
Yeah, this has been a real reality check for me. Okay, that's all the questions. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time today, Daniel. It's super interesting conversation, a little bit scary, but we're all going to deal with, hopefully we're lucky enough to deal with aging at some point. So I think it's super helpful to start having these conversations and thinking about retirement planning and saving for retirement. I really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge and wisdom with us. And the last question is just if someone does want to start this planning or wants to check out your platform, where can they find you?
Yeah, so we're at elderado.ca. So we spell it elder, like ELDERADO.ca. So that's our website. It's completely free to use. We try and put out a lot of helpful content on social media as well. And one last thing that I will share is that although I agree with you, Emma, that working in this industry now, it can be a little bit scary looking towards the future. But something that I'm quite optimistic about is that knowing that there are innovators like yourself that are making it easier for families, that there's all sorts of people that are working on, we've got a lot of hurdles to overcome here, but there's a lot of really bright, energetic people that are working really hard on these challenges. So it is something that makes me optimistic, is that knowing that there's organizations like Whimble that are working to make this process a little bit easier for families.
Awesome. I love ending on a positive note. I love that. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, we'll share Daniel's platform info with everyone in a follow-up email, and we'll also share a feedback survey just to hear if this discussion was helpful and if there's any other topics we should explore in the coming months. Thanks again, everyone, for your patience with my technical difficulties, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.